Hello, my name is Beth Ann. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. Today I want to do a quick review of The Fires of Vengeance by Evan Winter, which is the sequel to The Rage of Dragons by him, and these are both really recent. I think this one, well, I'm not going to look it up now. Anyway, I think The Rage of Dragons came out last year, and this one might have come out last year, or maybe came out this year. Anyway, they're really, really recent. And this book was a disappointment after The Rage of Dragons, which I really, really loved. And I talked about it in a standalone video, which I will link down below. So I was sort of blown away by that one. I mean, I can understand why it's not everybody's cup of tea. In both of these books, we follow one young man, Tao, who early on in The Rage of Dragons, he sort of loses everything that's important to him, and he sets out on a giant quest for revenge. And so that's continuing into this book. And that wasn't everybody's cup of tea, and some of the choices that Tao makes didn't really appeal to a lot of people, but I really liked the first book. And in this one, we see Tao continuing on his quest for vengeance of the specific people who he thinks sort of destroyed his life. And he's also increasingly enmeshed in very high-level politics in the world that he lives in. So the world that he lives in is strongly divided by caste. I guess it's essentially a caste system, and Tao belongs to the lowest levels of the caste system, the commons. And then there are sort of increasingly high levels of nobles up to the queen. And this society has invaded several hundred years previously. They've invaded a peninsula of land. They were sort of forced out of their homeland by a dangerous group of beings called the Cull, that we, the readers, and Tao himself don't really know anything about. They sort of have mythic status. And they're trying to invade this peninsula, and they've been trying for hundreds of years to establish a home, but there are people already living in the peninsula, and so Tao's people are waging a constant war against those other people. So Tao has become part of the military in the first book and has been working his way through military contests in his quest for revenge on some very powerful nobles, so much higher caste than him, that destroyed his life in the first book. So all of that continues. And it took a longer time for me to get a little sick of that than most people. And so in this book, we're still just seeing Tao revenge, revenge, revenge. And so that gets a little old. Although in this book, we also do start to see real personal growth and development where he's starting to think that maybe revenge isn't everything. But then the interesting thing for me is that it's still tinged with, not even tinged with, or just these very overt ideas that, like, even if it's not very healthy or not a totally fulfilling life to be totally set on revenge from a few specific people, there's really no other way than rage and violence to upend a rigid caste system where some people are oppressed. And so there's some really, really great lines in this book, mostly that Tao is saying to other people, or that are things that he's thinking inside of his head about how oppressed people need to sort of raise up and seize power. And it's just a really strong messaging that I really appreciated in this book. But it wasn't enough to overcome my annoyance about Tao, revenge, revenge, revenge all the time. And then the writing in this book is a bit rougher. There are a few things, especially towards the end of the book, that sort of happen out of nowhere. And of course, that's something that can happen in fantasy, but in this book, it clearly is a result of sloppy writing to me. There are things that could have been led up to, and even one or two actually that were led up to. There were just some little hints early on in the book, but in a book this long, you have to remind the reader what the hints were. And so it just, yeah, it sort of fell apart quite a bit at the end, which is why this book was a real letdown to me after the first one. So anyway, all of that said, I wanted to share just a couple of the lines that I found really compelling. And the reason that I find them compelling is because they're this speaking truth to power attitude, which I find so relevant in our own story, our own history and society today. And just for context, the author, Evan Winter, is a Black man, and one of the things that he wanted to achieve with writing these epic fantasy books is putting people who look like him into fantasy, and people that look like his son into fantasy. And so all the characters in these books are Black, and I just think that's really cool. But anyway, so a couple of the lines that I really like. So at this point, Tao is sort of assisting the queen. says the queen's cause wasn't his. Tao was fighting to get to Abasi Odili so he could rip him apart, turn him inside out, piece by bloody piece, because that was what it would take for the nobles to see and hear a man like him. To be understood, he'd speak the one language the powerful share with the powerless, the language of pain, fear, and loss. The powerful had to be shown that people can only be pushed so close to the flame before they catch fire and burn everything down. And then later, Tao is sort of confronting somebody, and he says, "Oh, you wish me to be civil?" Tao asked the larger man. "You want me to play the part of a noble when you'll never give me the same consideration as one. Is that the game?" I like that. I like all of these. Okay, and then later on, Tao is trying to convince another sort of lowly, common person like himself about why he tries so hard to be the best in the world at fighting. Tao kept marching, limping, and this other person says, you know, like, why do you care? Like, essentially, why are you playing their game? Why you're trying to be so good at this stuff? Tao says, because the limits to which we've been yoked were never ours, and the stories we've been told about our nature, our insignificance, and our lack, they were never true. So there's all this, the whole society is sort of founded on commons can never be as big and strong and powerful and capable, even just in a physical sense, than nobles. And Tao is proving that wrong. And then, yeah, here's one. So Tao is talking to the queen. He says, rage reaches into the world when we can no longer contain the hurt of being treated as if our life and loves do not matter. Rage and its consequences are what we get when the world refuses to change for anything less. And then finally, Tao says, the last thing I marked, Tao says, I'll reclaim my humanity by destroying a man who would otherwise deny it. You can't talk people into giving up their hold over you. You have to make them do it. So just, yeah, those are some powerful lines in this book, and especially with what's been going on in our country lately. I was just having visions of like riots in Minneapolis when George Floyd was murdered and things like that. So I did like some of the pieces of writing in this book, some of those minor moments, but overall it didn't sort of progress the overall story of where this series is going enough after the first book for me to love it as much. And the sort of annoying bits in the second half of the book where things just started happening with no warning and no lead up. And there's also very little resolution at the end of this book, which I think makes sense because it is going through, you know, we're in a series here. But there's got to be something that sort of stops and ends each book in a series. This is a meh book for me. I'm glad I read it, but I'm not super excited about it. So anyway, if you stuck around for this, I would love to hear what you thought of The Fires of Vengeance if you've read it, or if you read The Rage of Dragons, the first book in the series, and want to comment about that and whether it made you interested in reading this book. I would just love to hear your thoughts down below. So I hope you're all having a good August and enjoying reading whatever you're reading, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks. Bye.